Hey everyone, how's it going? And welcome back to another Demystifying Post-Production Monday. My name's Elly, and once again for this month, I'm joined with Lionel and Chad, who we can't currently see, but he is definitely here.
I'm
How are you guys
here.
doing?
What's up, everybody?
Happy Monday.
Hello.
Happy Monday to everyone in the chat as well. I say hey to Hannah, Charles, Brian, Drake, Sharon, Kent, Wesley. It's lovely to see you all. Thank you for being here live with us on this Monday, morning, afternoon, or evening, whatever time zone you're all in. So before we get into what we're going to be doing today, let me just talk about some of the stuff that's happened this week. So it's kind of a big week, actually, for Maxon. And not only just because we have some sessions going on, but we also have something big happening on Wednesday, which we're going to talk about just for a couple of minutes as well. So if you head over to the maxon.net events page, this is where you can see all of the great stuff that's happening as like a Maxon company, not just as a training team. So even though it does show our webinars and all of our sessions, it also shows the live events that are going on. So as you can see, we have on Fridays VFX and Chill, and then on Mondays we have this session today, which is our Demystifying Post-Production Voyages across applications. And today we're into week 3. And in a bit, Chad's going to tell us what we're going to be doing, but we'll just have a quick look at the rest of the stuff that's happening this week. So on Wednesday, we have our, a pretty big day. We have our Maxon Spring Launch event. So we have exciting updates coming to all the Maxon products. So if we just have a little look at this here, we can check this out. So this is 8 a.m. PDT. So all you have to do, this is going to be hosted on the main Maxon VFX YouTube channel. So it's going to be like a YouTube live, and it's going to be, some great exciting updates. So yeah, keep that in your calendars. And on that same day, so about an hour later, is going to be the final week or the final part of our Intro to Rigging in Cinema 4D workshop. So Joe Herman has been diving into some like incredible fundamentals of rigging. And so yeah, we're going to be looking at the final week for that, which is going to be the same day. So that's going to be on Wednesday. Then on Thursday, we have our Maxon Color, which is our color grading show with our kind of resident colorist Max, and that's going to be held on YouTube Live, on the Maxon Training Team's YouTube Live. And then I did want to quickly talk about something else that's happening. So starting on Sunday is NAB 2022. So for anyone who doesn't know what NAB is, it's like this massive event convention for media, entertainment, and tech people to all come together in Vegas. And we have great artists and great like presentations that goes on. It's like a really, really fun social like networking 4-day event. And Maxon are going to be there. So we're going to be there. We have a booth. So for anyone who is going to be there live, me and Chad, we're actually going to be there as well. So, come say hey to us. We'll be hanging out with like some of the other training teams, some amazing artists, Chris Schmidt, EJ, to name just a couple. So yeah, if you are there, come and say hey. We don't bite, do we, Chad? We'd love to meet everyone. And for anyone who isn't able to be there live, it is actually going to be hosted on the 3D Motion Show, which is then on our Maxon YouTube channel. So keen-eyed people will notice there's a second PDF in the handout section. So the first one is this one, which has our usual links for, the t-shirts that we love to give away, including the password, as well as the project files. And the second one is this one here, which just links to the 3D Motion Show. And if we just click that, it will open up the 22 events. And yeah, this has basically got all the information for the 4 days with all the great artists. We've got some artists and presentations to still be kind of like confirmed, but you can check out the 4 days. So we've got the Sunday, the Monday, the Tuesday, and the Wednesday on there. And then yeah, it's hosted on the main Maxon YouTube channel. And going back to the events, if you ever miss any of our events or any of our training sessions, they get put onto our Maxon Training Team YouTube channel. And what we're going to do, the presentations that us as trainers are doing over these events, we're gonna get that recording and we're going to get them on there. Because Chad, I believe, is week 4 going to be hosted live from NAB?
Yes, it is. We're going to be doing it live in person from the show floor. From the booth, and so you can actually visit us and be there live when we do this at 10:30 Pacific on Monday. So yeah, it'll
That's
be
gonna
really
be so
fun.
much fun. I'm gonna be there shouting like cheers from the crowd for my encouragement.
We also, you
Yeah.
know, we're all actually going to be teaching. So we're going to be talking about like taking stuff into Premiere using Mogerts and also some motion graphics you can do natively in Premiere, but also taking stuff from Trapcode and getting it into Premiere where you could have customization over particle systems right in Premiere. So we're not going to just be like hanging out and being like, oh, what's up? We're going to be like, yeah, actually talking about stuff. So
I'll be just hanging out and be like, hey, what's up? Cool. Yeah. So I just wanted to talk about all that kind of great stuff that's happening this week and next week. As you can see, there's so much going on, you know, along with all the other great sessions that the Maxon Train team do as a collective.
Mhm.
So, Chad, are we ready to hand it over and you know figure out what we're going to be doing today?
I think so.
Cool. Let me chuck it over to
Okay.
you.
There we go. I see the thing.
See the thing.
Show my screen. Let's hope this works.
Cool. Yeah, we can
It
see
does.
your screen.
You can? Okay, cool. It's
We
really weird. I
can.
don't get like any confirmation that like my screen is being seen by people. So then I'm kind of like, oh, um,
Oh yeah, no, it's like the standard webinar procedure to be like, can everyone see my screen?
yeah, it doesn't feel like it, but yes, welcome everyone. So today we're gonna be doing some weird stuff. You know, this whole month is about like, you know, creative voyages is the theme, you know, because the world's opening back up and we're traveling and going places and stuff like that. So in honor of that, we're having this month about traveling from one application to another. And this week is kind of wacky because we're gonna be talking about Unreal Engine. So getting content from Cinema 4D, bringing it into Unreal, getting content from actually AfterEffects and Trapcode, bringing that into Unreal using Magic Bullet looks in Unreal. It's kind of an interesting thing. So I would imagine that maybe some of you are brand new to Unreal Engine and don't know how to use it. It is an unbelievably complicated program. And so, you know, even if we had, you know, 5 hours to spend together, we'd probably just barely scratch the surface and leave you without the ability to do very much, unfortunately. So what I thought I would do is just kind of introduce you to the engine, give you a little bit of just kind of like a setup of like how to use it, and then we'll go a little bit more into detail of like what's possible with Cinema 4D. So, you know, Unreal is a game engine. So, you know, I look at this like scene here and, you know, it's got a bunch of things going on and it's like really pretty, but you can already see stuff moving. If I hit play here, I could actually just like run through this and you can see that this is like rendering in real time. So we talk a lot about like, you know, rendering issues and, you know, the time it takes to render and whatnot. But here we have this scene that is like rendering like on the fly, literally in real time. And so as you see, like even like the wind and the trees, everything's moving, and this is not like taking a long time to render. And so the thing is that we can go and bring our art from Cinema here into Unreal and render it here if we want to. And it does, again, take a lot to set up. So it might not be something that you want to do for every project, but even if you're doing motion graphics or visual effects, this is like a really cool workflow that's kind of like up and coming. And one of the big like leaders at Unreal, one of the big like the CA, I don't want to say CFO. I get my COs confused, but one of the chief officers is from the film industry and is working really hard to make Unreal more useful for cinematic visual effects workflows. So that applies to us. And there are also a lot of tools that Maxon makes that you might not be aware of for use in Unreal to make a better bridge between Cinema and Unreal. But all this complexity to be able to render real time is incredible. And we could also render this out. So I'll be showing you later a scene that I made in Cinema 4D Lite, the free version of Cinema that comes with AfterEffects. I made it in Cinema 4D Lite, brought it over here into Unreal, and you could render it from Unreal if you wanted to. It's kind of a powerful workflow that is also free because Unreal Engine is also free to use. Let me point this out. When you first get Unreal, the way that this works is that you you go to the Epic website, Epic Games website, and you get the Epic Games launcher. And then the Epic Games launcher will allow you to get Unreal Engine. Again, it's totally, completely free. The way that they make their money is if you make a huge game that has like, I don't know, hundreds of thousands of installations or licenses or whatever you sell, then you start giving them like a small percentage of the royalties or whatever. But other than that, for like you and me, just using like this for graphics, it's totally free. So you can go to the marketplace, you could download scenes. That's where I got this scene from that we were just looking at. Because this scene is actually from the game Edith Finch, which I played through with my kids. It's like an amazing, amazing game. So they give you assets like this to play with for free, which is like really incredible. So let's back up. And when you first go to the Epic Games launcher, you could download these different versions of the engine. And hey, that's not what I said. So we have these different versions of the engine. And right now the current version is 5, but it's new. So other than that, like a lot of probably the most common version out there right now is the Unreal 4.27 engine. So you install it, you can go over here and launch it. You can install new engine versions by clicking the plus icon. And then once you have it here, you can launch it. Again, the marketplace is where you can get all kinds of different plugins and free things and paid things that you could add to your scene, but there's tons and tons and tons of free 3D models and materials and all sorts of stuff to use with Unreal, which is really cool. And here's the projects that you've created that you can choose from and use. So you just click on launch and it launches, and then it gives you this window that I'm not going to show you here because I already have it up and running and set up, and that can take a minute, but it gives you some templates to use. And so I usually start with a games template, and this is the 3rd person template, which looks just like this, and it kind of looks like a template. And so I'm going to be using this to kind of explain a little bit about the basics of Unreal, and then we're going to kind of like build from scratch a little bit. So here we have this scene. I can go over here to the play icon, click play, and then I'm all of a sudden in like game mode. And so then I click inside this window to actually control this like it's a game. I could use the arrow keys to move forward and turn, and then I could use like the space bar to like jump. So it's like very similar to the way a video game would feel. And I hit escape to exit out of gameplay mode and get back into kind of like creation mode. Now, for those of us that are familiar with Cinema 4D, there are some things that are quite familiar. So in the upper right-hand corner, we have the world outliner, which is very similar to the objects manager. So we have like the objects here. So I could click on the floor or a wall. I could also click inside of the viewer here and like let's say click on these stairs, and it will select the object here in the world outliner, aka objects manager. And then when I select it, I see all of its properties here in the details panel, which is very similar to the attributes panel or the attributes manager in Cinema 4D. So we can already see that the workflow here is somewhat similar. And actually, we also have some, the place actors panel. By the way, if these aren't showing, you go to the window menu, and just like in Adobe applications, you look in the window menu, and if something's not showing, you can select the panel to see. But this place actors panel is where you can get some assets to drag and drop into your scene. There's also the content browser at the bottom, which also functions as kind of like a manager for all of your things. So these two things together are kind of like the asset browser in Cinema, where you get content and then drag and drop it. If I wanted to drag and drop like a sphere into my scene, I can do that. And then I have these like basic transforms, and then I could use the keyboard shortcuts W, E, and R to get move, rotation, and scale respectively. And I could change those in the viewport. I could non-uniform scale or rotate or move these based on these gizmos as well. Let's just stand there. I'm just going to go ahead and delete that sphere. And again, we can select the object and go down here to the details panel, aka attributes manager, and fiddle with these settings to adjust them here. There's location, which is like position, so I can move these around. There's also scale, and I could unlock this to adjust this non-uniformly or lock this to do a uniform scale. So those are the basics of what's going on here when we're dealing with a scene in Unreal. Let's see, time is of the essence, and so let's move on. I'm going to show you just a blank project here. I'm not going to save that.
Chad, real
Yes,
quick, I don't want to
do
take
it.
up your time. We've
No,
had a
please.
quick question from Anthony, wondering about your current machine specs.
Oh, that's a good question. So right now I'm on my PC, which is, I don't know, like a year or two old. Typically I work on the Mac, and Unreal works on the Mac. This works really great, but like I think Unreal gives a little bit more love to the PC. So like Mac, it's like there's like, I'll explain this later, but I've got a lot of corruptions as I've been working on this, and then like my entire project has been corrupted. I have to start all over again. So there's a little bit more flexibility on the PC to go in and take those apart, where there's not on a Mac. That doesn't answer your question at all, but just as a side note. So I think I have a 2080 Ti as far as a graphics card in this machine, and then the processor is like the 10 thing. You know, like there's like the is it i10? i9, i10, is that something? I don't know. I'm not a specs guy. It's not a phenomenal computer. It's just kind of like an average, off the shelf, fairly decent machine, but it's not great, especially by these current standards. Like 2 years ago, it was an all right machine, but not like a jaw-dropping thing or whatever. But game engines have long been designed, like video games and game engines have long been designed to like just run on any machine and to do really well, to learn how to make it so that it can run in real time. So even if your machine's like a little like older or weaker, like it should be okay. You should be able to run all this content in real time, if that's the underlying subtext of the question.
Cool, cheers.
Okay, sorry, that's probably not a very helpful answer.
No,
But
no, we got a thanks. He was just wondering.
okay, cool. Yeah, and I should also point out too that I'm not like, as you've probably already ascertained, I'm not like the god of Unreal. I'm still learning this myself. It all is all very new to me. I mean, I've studied this for like dozens and dozens of hours, which doesn't amount to very much in the world of Unreal. But so this is kind of like the blind leading the blind, is in a sense. So forgive me for not knowing the answer to like all questions, but anyways, I just want to show you this really quick. So we have a blank scene, which you could also create as a template. And I recommend doing one of those like third person or first person examples, because they kind of set up the world for you. And they also set up kind of like the environment, which can be scary. So if I have this blank scene right here, and I just drag a cube over, you could see by the outline that the cube is here. But if I were to like say drag and drop a plane underneath that, then the cube appears to disappear. And if we deselect both of those, then it's just kind of like vanished into nothingness. So we actually have to do some kind of like, they don't give us like the Cinema 4D kind of like default lighting thing, so we can just kind of like tell what we're doing. It's not that friendly. So if I go into the light setup and I add some directional light, then we have kind of like this sun, which the directional light in Unreal is actually pretty powerful. It does kind of like replicate a sun in some ways. And that's still not looking great though. So I need to go and add something called an atmospheric fog. Well, I can add an atmospheric fog. That's one of the things that we can do. And I can like hold down the Option key and click and drag, and then I create, I could orbit around. I could also hold the Alt or Option key and use the middle mouse button to dolly, and hold Alt and right click to zoom in and out. So the controls are very familiar from what you're used to from working in other 3D applications. And we're seeing that we have this going on here. I can now go back to my directional light, and there's so many parameters here. They scroll and scroll and scroll and scroll and scroll. It's like using Trapcode particular or something like that. There's just a lot of options. So in search details, I know I'm looking for some kind of like sun thing. So I'm just going to type sun, and I can just jumps me right to the property, which is atmosphere sunlight, which allows me to use this directional light as kind of like a sun with the atmosphere. So then if I go to the directional light and I rotate it, then it's going to change the time of day. I'm hearing like this kind of like morning mood, like na 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 na. Because you can make it like, you know, sunrise. There's a little sun right there. And so we're seeing that. If I want to add some GI to the scene, I can go to the lights area. There's a skylight here. Click and drag to bring that in. You see the difference that makes automatically if I turn that on and off. So there's before and there's after. So it's kind of like a global illumination that we have in our scene. And now we could do something. We could start adding more and more stuff to this. Okay, so that's the like basic overall gist of how to do stuff in Unreal. Let's look at how to use it with Cinema 4D. I'm going to go to my C4D. By the way, these are levels. These are actually, you know what? Never mind. Let me go back to my blank thing really quick. I'm going to show you how to import from Cinema 4D. Now, a really crucial part of this, I wouldn't say crucial, that's an exaggeration, but something that's very important to be aware of. I'm going to go to the settings here at the top and go on this drop down, and I'm going to go to my plugins. And this is quite important. We have loads and loads and loads of plugins. We have 389 plugins that we can install, and a lot of them, like this one right here, Actor Palette, for example, is not enabled. And so on a project by project basis, you have to go and enable plugins that you want to use for that project. Now, Unreal projects are colossal. What I've been using here is actually, these are levels that you can use, or maps as they are called often. And so think of it like a video game. You know, it could have a bunch of different worlds, and then within those worlds there could be a bunch of different levels, and there can be materials and particles and everything else all contained within a project. So they can be very powerful. So you wouldn't use a project like you would with Cinema 4D to do like one little tiny thing. You'd use a project to encompass a bunch of all your things. So if I did a search for C4D, you could see that we have the Datasmith C4D Importer, which is pretty cool and allows us to bring in native Cinema 4D projects. And that's fantastic. And that's all enabled by default, which is really cool. But there's also a plugin right here that is Cineware for Unreal. And this sometimes is not enabled by default. So you might need to enable that, and then it'll have you restart Unreal as well. If you're not seeing Cineware for Unreal, you can, I just closed the web page, darn it. But there is a page on the Maxon website that is the Cineware for Unreal page, and you can get these plugins and then install them manually, and you can get Cineware. And I'm going to show you the difference between the Datasmith thing and Cineware for Unreal in just a second. But while I'm here, I also want to point out that there's, if I do a search on Magic, that we also have Magic Bullet Looks as a plugin inside of Unreal. And you could do all kinds of really crazy stuff with Magic Bullet Looks. You can have it be like in the game, you could have it be just in the sequencer, which I'll explain in a bit. You could have it do a bunch of things. So Magic Bullet Looks in Unreal is actually a very, very brilliant tool. When I first heard that this is in Unreal, I was like, why? But then as I started playing with it, I was like, oh my gosh, this is such a valuable tool. This is such a great idea. So anyways, that's there. And I've gone ahead and installed those in this project already. So I'm going to go to this blank project. I'm going to click on that. Once you install the Datasmith plugin and you have that installed, then it puts this Datasmith button here. So I can click on Datasmith. And then it'll say, okay, what do you want to bring in? Now, I'm going to pause here and go over to Cinema to show you what I've done. Oops, that's a spoiler for what's going to happen in just a second. But I did this. Okay, let me show you this really quick. I'm just going to move over my takes. I'll just close materials for now. And so this is the project that I wanted to bring over into Unreal. I wonder if I could render this really quickly, just to kind of show you what this looks like, the final deal here. And it looks like the answer to my question is no. I cannot render this really quickly and show you what's going on. But you get a better sense of how this looks when it's as it's rendering. And again, this is something that we made from scratch in Cinema 4D Lite. So if you're curious how to make this with Cinema 4D Lite, the free tool that comes with AfterEffects, we did this in January of 2022. So you can go back to those sessions on YouTube and see like how we made like these Gothic arches and the columns and like all of this business. So I want to be able to take this and use this in Unreal, and some of this stuff is not going to carry over. For example, like I have this green mist, which is a property of some of the lights. It's like fog, directional light, volumetric light from the lights, and that's not going to carry over. But I want to just leave this as is to show you kind of like what this would look like in Unreal. Now, one of the things that I did, which I recommend doing, is going to File and then Save Project for Cineware. This tends to cache things and just have a better translation as you take this across into other applications from my experience. I don't know that that's necessary, especially if you're just using the Datasmith plugin, but that can help. So then I can bring that, I did that already here, where I can, double clicked on that before I wanted to. And so then you, well, I selected that there, and then you're brought into this menu, which shows you like, okay, where in your project do you want to save that? Now, it does take a long time to bring this in, so I'm just gonna go ahead and hit cancel, and then I already have one that's already set up with this, where I just like clicked import. Now, when you import this, I got these things. I honestly thought this was like a speck on my monitor, so I got out my like cloth and I was like trying to clean this thing off my monitor, and it's actually in my project, which is pretty funny. And this, as you can see, does not look very much like what's going on. For some reason, things can come over kind of wacky like this, so you might have to go in and do some fiddling. And I wanted to show you this intentionally because I don't want to give you the impression that like, oh yeah, you just like click a button and then everything you bring over from Cinema is like perfect all the time, because that's not the case. So I click on my key light, for example, and in Cinema, my key light, if I look at the key light here, the intensity is at 180%, which is quite a bit, right? But it's not, you know, ridiculous to have a light, especially as a distant light there, and it's at 180%. But when I bring that over into Unreal, the intensity is 14,400, and I believe the normal default intensity is just like 1 or something, or 10. Yeah, so then if I click this little like arrow right there, once you change a value, you'll get this little kind of like, it's very hard to see probably on the webinar, but this little curved yellow arrow that's basically kind of like an undo. It basically lets you reset to default, which is really handy. So then I can click this and it goes back to the default settings there. So now that we have a key light that has like a little bit more decent, intensity to it, then we can kind of see a little bit more what's going on. I still don't even see where my green glowing thing was, which is fine, because I know I labeled it well. I could click on Magic Sphere and I'll just click the F key and it zooms me to that thing. So now I could see, okay, this is where we're at here. So now I can rotate, oops, that's not what I want to do. I can rotate around my scene and get this into better shape. And again, a lot of that volumetric light and stuff like that didn't come over properly into my scene. As you can see, some of it did, like all the lights that I had inside of these arches, that's coming over, and then the light here in the sphere, as well as the terrain, the materials, the displacement, like all that kind of stuff, that came over just fine. So it's just kind of a matter of going in and, you know, using Unreal lights and atmospheres in order to recreate that and fix that. So I have like the final version here. Going to save that. And this is after fiddling with it and doing some tweaking and whatnot. And so this is that. So I can actually go in here, hit play, and oh, I left this on. That's also a spoiler for later because we're gonna be talking about bringing the Trapcode thing in. So that's from Trapcode 4. But I could go into this world here that I made in Cinema 4D Lite and just like walk around it. I mean, that's just such a cool feeling to be able to explore with like a little, you know, a little person, like a little robot humanoid person, and walk through this landscape and explore it in this way, like in real time, as if I'm in it. I mean, it's very, very cool. You might have noticed that like I replaced the moon with a planet in Unreal. I also went in and there's the atmospheric objects that I created to create some like clouds and stars actually here in Unreal. So those would render. I did have some water on the ground. There's a great water plugin. If I go to my plugins here, a great new experimental thing with water. But I found that when I install the water plugin, it often corrupts my entire project and makes it so I can't open anything at all. That's happened to me several times with this. So I just decided to leave my water off. So it looks like a pool that's been drained, and it's not super fantastic as it would be with the water moving through here, but at least it's not totally corrupted. You might also notice that there's some like particles kind of flinging around here, which is pretty cool. And if I go to my particles, you can see the particle system I created. There's a built-in particle system called Niagara. There's an old one called Cascade that's been replaced recently by Niagara, which is more powerful. So if I open this up, you can see, no, you can't because it's on a different monitor. But there is like a full particle system that's very, very powerful. They're bringing fluids and volumes to this as well, so that renders in real time. So this is just kind of like a dinky little, fairy dust type thing that I created, but I was able to add those particles into my scene as well. Now I'm gonna go back to my levels here. Oh, one other thing that I wanted to point out. So in my scene here, this took me a minute to figure out, so I wanted to share that. In my scene, like the final version, as my character walks into like these arches, like he bounces off of them, like it's like a block, he can't get through them. And then as he goes to the rock, I could actually climb on it. And by default, you can't do that. By default, when you import C4D geometry, your character will just walk right through it. So I want to show you how to set up those collisions because it's a very, very quick process, which is something kind of unusual for Unreal. Most things are not quick and easy. So if I go over to my my magic sphere here, hit F again so I could see my magic sphere, and then I click on this center landscape. You can see that there. First of all, I don't have a character in this scene, so I want to add a character. The way to do that is by going into the basic area here in the Place Actors panel and click Player Start, and I can drag Player Start into this. And sometimes it'll say bad size. There'll be like a little warning on it that says bad size. That just means it's interacting with geometry and that's not going to work. So just kind of adjust it and move it until it doesn't say bad size anymore. But this allows you to have like a character start, and see this arrow is like the direction they're going to start in and whatever. So you can fiddle with that until you get the start correctly. And then when I have my geometry here, like say center landscape, and I go down to the details panel, you see like the static mesh area and also a materials area. So this is kind of like a really quick way to adjust properties of the mesh or its material. Now, thankfully, I don't know too much about materials in Unreal, and the materials I brought over from Cinema just kind of carry over, which is very great for me, who is new to Unreal. But if I wanted to adjust the materials, I could double click this little square here with the material, and this will open up the materials area. And here we have our material that we can fiddle with. I'm just going to go ahead and close that for now and go back to my static mesh. I'm going to double click my mesh here, and there's my mesh in all of its glory, and it gives us this kind of like office scene in the back, so we can kind of see it lit and see kind of like what's going on with it. But we could fiddle with those settings if we wanted to. I'm not going to do that now, but here's what we want to do. We want to adjust the collision. Now, if I go up here to my collision and I choose simple collision, then it kind of creates like a box around the details, and it's not great because it doesn't. You could tell that it's not really seeing the nooks and crannies. So if I scroll down here to the in the details inside of this panel, then we get to a collision area. So I go to collision complexity, and I wanted to choose use complex collision as simple. Use complex collision as simple. Now we're in this extra like static mesh panel here where we're adjusting the mesh of this thing and its properties. So we actually have to save it here in this window. And then when we go back, our character will see all the nooks and crannies of this geometry as well. So you get a little bit more detailed interaction, which is pretty cool. Now, I'm actually doing pretty good on time, which is surprising. I'm going to move on here because I want to talk about something else, which is using Cineware. So what we've talked about is the Datasmith import. That's been around for a few years, but I want to talk about Cineware for Unreal, which is new as of like November of last year, I think, 2021. It's a fairly new thing. So I could go to my Cineware start. I'm not going to save this, which is a blank thing. And I want to show you what I did in Cinema. And this was like the spoiler. So what I did, I just created, I made just like the most simple thing that I possibly could in Cinema. I made an inside shape here. And maybe if I took off all this business, I could just show you. Yeah, so inside, and just like the default settings are basically a honeycomb. So I just did that. And then I extruded it with a little bit of bevel. And then I added a cloner to make a bunch of them. And I used the honeycomb shape for the cloner. And I'm on a different take right now. Let's go back to my main take. So yeah, here we go. So mode, honeycomb. And then I used the shader effector to add some different color. And right now, Lionel and Elly are probably like cringing in horrible pain at seeing my my super novice Cinema 4D skills. My apologies to these
Absolutely not. Definitely
Cinema 4D gods. This must be like difficult to watch. Like, oh, you did it so wrong in so many ways.
Don't worry. Don't worry.
Thank you for your patience and mercy. So I made these honeycombs, and what I want to do is bring this over into Unreal Engine and render this with all of the tools and power of real time and the flexibility in Unreal Engine. And we can do this using Cineware. If you're familiar with Cineware and AfterEffects, it's kind of a way you can just bring in native Cinema 4D project files to AfterEffects and customize them and tweak them on the fly. And so what I want to do here is, so that I have some flexibility, is to create a new take. So I opened up my takes manager here, and I clicked on the plus. And I learned this from you, Lionel. Thank you so much for earlier this month in this same series of creative voyages, teaching us about takes. And so as he taught us, I just clicked the plus button to make a new take. And then everything, once we are selecting that take, everything is grayed out. And so when we want flexibility over something in Unreal, then we can right click and overwrite it. So I went to the end side here, and I did that with the sides. If I go to rounding, I could see this more clearly. See, it says override, and I could choose override. And then when I have a property that's being overridden, then I can fiddle with it in Unreal without having to come back to Cinema 4D, which is really, really cool. So what I did here, I just did the properties I choose to override or unlock essentially for fiddling are the sides of the end side, and also the offset value, which is basically the extrusion amount of the hexagons here. And then I did the file save project for Cineware deal, and then come back over into Unreal. And then I can go into my Datasmith, and I can import the Cineware for Unreal project. And again, that takes a minute to load with all of its like whatever. So I already set that up for you here, and you can see we have like our hexagons, and it's fine. But what I can do here is I can go, and actually what I did is I brought this in a different spot. This is kind of screwy. Oops. See, that's not the thing I was looking for. Okay. Well, this might not work. But when you bring this in, it creates this kind of like separate file here. So if I double click on this, then all of the attributes that I've unlocked using takes will show up in this window. And so then I can adjust my extrusion and adjust my end sides here and change those. So let's say I'll take this down to just 4 points, the diamond's down to 4 points, and then I'll take up the extrusion to like, I don't know, like I'll just click in here and type 100. And then what we have to do is click the re-import button, which sounds hairy, but it's not. And we just get this window a few times and it's like, oh, okay, fiddling with this, fiddling with this. As I mentioned, this can take a minute. So this is why I had everything kind of like preloaded. Click import. For some reason, it makes you have to keep clicking the import button several times. So maybe I did something wrong, or it's like, are you sure you want to do this? Are you sure you want to do this? All right, there we go. So now we have more extrusion, and we have 4 diamonds, and we didn't have, or we have 4 sides to our n-gon there, and we don't have to go back to Cineware. So if we were doing motion graphics, we had text, and we want to kind of like replace the text or whatever else we want to do, we can unlock those using takes in Cinema, and then we have that power here in Unreal where we have that flexibility. And again, this is a very crude and simple example, but you can imagine if we were to take this further, how much power we'd be able to have with this here with real-time rendering. Pretty cool stuff. The last thing that I wanted to go over is something that's kind of interesting. I created this project in AfterEffects, and I'm just going to go, let's see here. I'm going to go to my desktop. Yeah, so I created this project. Let me just open this up. So we have a minute. So I made this like little force field in form, which again, I kind of spoiled already with earlier. Kind of spoiled by showing you the thing in my.
It was just a teaser.
It was just a teaser. Thank you.
That's what we call it. We call it a teaser.
That makes me feel.
Accidentally say something.
Yes, yes. I didn't really explain it much, so it's kind of like, oh, introduce some mystery. So I basically went in with Trapcode form, and I created this little like deal here, this little particle thing that you might see in a game or something like that. And the reason why I use Trapcode form is because with the fractal field here, you can go into the loop, flow loop, and enable flow loop. And you could set a composition that's however many seconds you want. So I have a 2-second composition, and then I set the loop time for 2.0, which is 2.0 seconds, and then it has this seamless loop. I should also point out that when you make a loop for 2 seconds, that the first frame and the last frame are the same, so you have a duplicate frame. So it's basically 1 frame shy of 2 seconds. And so then I have this cool portal looking thing that I made with form. Basically, there's like some spherical field displacement on it as well. So if I take the strength down, you can see what that looks like on the spherical field, but then I crank that up. Oops. Crank that up, and then we have this like portal. So I exported this as a ping sequence. I'm just gonna close that up. Export this as a ping sequence, and one of the things I want to talk about is like how to bring in those sequences and use stuff like that for in Unreal. Turns out that's like a really complicated process, even for Unreal. So you have to create something called an image media source, and the way that you create stuff in Unreal is we can just right-click in a blank area in the content browser, and from here we can create all manner of things. We can create a new level, we can create folders to organize things, we can create a material, we can create a particle system, we can create all these foliage, we can create all kinds of things from this right-click here. So I went to media and created an image media source. and that allowed me to import the first frame of my ping sequence, and then it just brings into a sequence, and you just have an image media source. Then you have to right click and create a media player, and that creates this thing, so we could actually see it playing. And then from there, we have to create a media texture, and then we have to apply that to our object and create a material. Then we have to go into like the level blueprint. It's a pretty complicated process. But if we go back to the teaser here, oh, I think I just messed up. Did I mess up the whole thing? No, there we go. So if I go back here, you can see the thing we made in Trapcode form in AfterEffects as like this, texture that we're using. And we can make it so our character interacts with that, or we could use it in particles or whatever, but I just kind of use it as like an object in our scene for right now. It's like halo around our sphere. So that's pretty cool. Let me say, so we have a couple minutes left. Let me introduce something that I hadn't planned on doing. And because I hadn't planned on doing this, it's probably gonna be like a little rough, but there's an interesting area in Unreal called the sequencer. And it's made for creating cinematics. Like when you play a video game, it's like, it looks like this, and you're kind of like going around and walking, doing your thing, and then you beat something, and it's cool. And then you'll see like a little movie, and you could make those little movies called cinematics. Like oftentimes, like you beat a level, like you get to the sphere, and all of a sudden it cuts to a movie of like these gods making the sphere or whatever, I don't know. So we can go to the cinematics drop down, and we could add like a new sequence. We could add a new level sequence or master sequence here. I've already created some sequences, but it says basically like, where do you want to save this as? But if I go into, if I do a search for sequences here, you can see that, well, maybe that's not going to work. I'll just go to my sequences. So here's a sequence I've already created, and this allows you to create like cuts and edits, and it allows you to have like more cinematic cameras and things like that. So if I click on my camera actor, you can see that this is like the situation that I set up here, where like you could get depth of field and change again like the sensor size, and create movies in this way. We could animate the cameras and then render this out. So if you're looking to create more visual stuff, more high quality stuff that's not real time, the sequencer is like the where you'd want to do that. You could change the frames per second, like all that kind of thing. And then here also is one of the places you can use Magic Bullet looks. So I don't think I have that set up here. So let me show you how to do that. There is, oops. Yeah, well, let me explain this. So there's a thing called a post-process volume that you can add, which kind of adds like some like fine tuning and tweaking to the look of a scene. And the Magic Bullet looks volume is essentially a post-process volume with Magic Bullet looks. So I can drag and drop this into my scene here. And then if I click on it and I go down to the details panel, you can see that we have all this stuff, the dirt on the lens and lens effects and all that kind of stuff. But if I scroll down here, then there is Magic Bullet looks. So I can click open Magic Bullet looks. Wait for it. And so now here we have Magic Bullet looks, and we have all of our familiar looks that we can add to tweak this, give this like more chrono steel, for example. I could go into my tools and I could tweak this if I wanted to, make this more intense. Maybe I want to make the highlights more yellow if I wanted to do that, warm them up. I have total flexibility. I could add more tools, do whatever I want to, and I could click check to apply this. Now we're not seeing this here, but if I go into my actual camera, then we can see the Magic Bullet looks happening there. So, and that's just like one of the ways that you can use Magic Bullet looks. So that's kind of the long and short of what I wanted to cover, it's basically, you know, again, Unreal is too big of a beast to cover very well, obviously. As demonstrated, it's impossible to cover well, like in an hour. But I just wanted to show you that there is flexibility here. Unreal is going to be becoming more and more common in post-production workflows as virtual production becomes bigger and bigger. So being aware of how to bring in everything from like Trapcode tools and AfterEffects renders to Cinema 4D projects with Cineware to Magic Bullet looks, color looks, bring that stuff into Unreal is something just worth being aware of. And with that, oh wait, let me show, sorry, one more thing I wanted to show real quick. I have here materials, and I wanted to, oh wait, this isn't gonna be, what I'm missing here is my, oops. What I'm missing here is the, there we go. What I wanna show is like, when you're doing materials in, okay, this is a little ridiculous, but when you're doing materials in Unreal, it's very similar to Redshift, as Elly taught us, a couple of months ago with our hands-on series, that we have this main material here, and then we can right-click or hit the tab key in a blank area of the grid of the materials, and we can make things like like a constant. Actually, it's not called a constant here, but yeah, there we go. So like I could make a constant, and I can choose like what value that constant is, and then wire that into attributes and all these kind of things. So if you're familiar with Redshift, using Redshift and like the node graph area, then creating materials here in Unreal is very similar. So not really an integration thing, but something to be aware of, that if you are familiar with Redshift, then you already kind of have a leg up when you're creating materials in Unreal. So that's all I wanted to say. Sorry, Elly, go ahead. You were saying something.
No, I was just going to say we had a quick question from Greg. Regarding the poly count for objects, do you have to think about reducing the poly count before you import? And what about like subdivision surfaces from your C4D files coming into Unreal?
That's a great question. So one of the things that I see, this is like this has been my experience with Unreal. It's really cool that I've been able to let go this entire hour almost without this crash, but yeah, this has been my life for the last week. Yeah, so one of the reasons I didn't get into gaming when I started learning 3D like 20 years ago was because of the poly count. Like the vertex count and the weight of the geometry was such a big deal that you had to make everything, you had to spend a lot of time studying how to reduce your geometry in order to get it to work in the game engine. And that's becoming less and less and less the case, where like you don't really have to worry about it as much, because I mean, you saw that Edith Finch scene. I mean, there was just massive amounts of things going on in that scene, and the system is great with accommodating that. But actually, I'll just go ahead and close this and get back to Unreal, because one of the things here, let's see, is there home? Yeah. So they just launched Unreal Engine 5. And Unreal Engine 5 is just, it's nuts. It's nuts what you can do in Unreal Engine 5. And like geometry is just not a problem. They have a demo scene where there was just billions and billions and billions of polygons, tons and tons of detail. And they really wanted to make it so that in Unreal Engine 5, that's just not an issue anymore at all. I don't know the wizardry behind that, like what kind of like dark oaths had to be made, but that's kind of the way it is, which is really incredible.
Cool. And we had one final thing. So Wesley was wondering, so you were referring to the Datasmith kind of way of importing and the Cinema 4D plugin. Could you just like really quickly explain the two? Because he was wondering, are they two different paths for importing, or does one require the other? And we're just hoping for a little kind of explanation really quickly again.
That's a great question. And you know what I'm gonna do? I'm gonna go ahead and launch the engine, and I'm gonna show you how this works from a blank project, which is pretty cool. This should go pretty quickly. because I'm just going to make a brand new project. And I didn't show you how to create a new project from scratch anyway. So this is what you're typically created with if you're just launching the engine from scratch. So this is what I was talking about, where there's different templates. And what I recommend doing if you're new is starting with games templates. Go next. And then there's blank, which is just kind of like nothing, but they understand how intimidating it is to create these environments and stuff like that from scratch. So even the blank project just actually has an environment with the lighting set up to get going. But I'll go back to third person. As you can see here, you could also use first person, but I think third person is a great way to start. So I can click next, and I'll go ahead and create a dummy project just so I can get into the plugins and show you. Okay, and then plugins. Okay, oops, let's do C4D. Okay, so the Datasmith C4D Importer has been around for a while. This allows you to bring in Cinema 4D projects. So when I brought in that scene from Cinema 4D Lite, that world with like the sphere and the columns and junk, like that was just using this. So if you just have this installed, then that's all you need. If that's all you want to do, is just bring in cinema files. But again, there's the Cineware, which is new. And this is what I used for the hexagons. And with the Cineware for Unreal, that's what recognizes the takes. So when I changed the n-gons and the extrusion of the extrude object, excuse me, that was using Cineware for Unreal because we had that flexibility to kind of reload and tweak things that way. So they are two different things. The Datasmith is just for importing. The Cineware gives you the customization to fiddle with it in Unreal without having to go back to Cinema and make those changes, which if you have a really big scene, like a really big level that's very complex, having to go back and make a change to your geometry and fearing messing all that up is really scary. So being able to customize things that you might want to change later using Cineware for Unreal is great. So they definitely do different things.
Cool. Thanks for explaining that again.
Great questions.
Cool. Yeah, that was those were all the questions that were coming in. So I know Lionel's been answering a couple in the background. Like someone was asking about the new features of Unreal 5, and it was great that you then showed how it doesn't really care about polys and geometry now, which sounds like it's going to be a lot of fun to play with.
Yeah, and the global illumination of Unreal 5. And again, they're working on better like really detailed animations that they've never been able to do in video games before. Fluid systems, all that kind of stuff. Like that's real-time rendering of fluid simulations and volumes and all that kind of stuff is just nuts. So yeah, some really cool stuff coming down the pike for Unreal 5 for sure.
Yeah, it sounds like it. Just have one other quick question come in from Remy. I've seen some problems sometimes on the re-import of C4D on object mesh with Datasmith, where it changes place when we re-import the scene. Any ideas of how to fix, or have you come across it before, perhaps?
No, I can't say I've come across that, but again, I'm probably not the person to ask because I'm not like a resident expert at all this stuff.
Yeah.
I don't understand the spaces between Unreal and Cinema, and as we saw during the import, there's a lot of stuff that doesn't come over in the right way, and I'm not really sure exactly why, what the rationale is behind why it's not coming over in the correct way. So yeah, sorry about that.
No worries. Michael was saying a very helpful overview. Thanks, and I'd absolutely agree.
Cool, thanks. I know like sometimes like these kind of overviews like leave you kind of like empty because it's like, you don't really have the space to do that much, but it's, it's great if you're just trying to get familiar with this technology and be aware of why this might be worth learning, for some people, for sure.
Yeah, and it was great to see the way that you can like bring your C4D file, and like you said, you made it in like C4D Lite, bring that into Unreal. Like I've not really used Unreal much, and this was, I thought this was a super great overview of seeing how you can combine the two and sort of start to dive into Unreal.
Cool.
I think it's really cool.
Thank you so much.
No, thank you, Chad. Let me just switch my camera back on. Thank you, yeah, for that. It was such a great hour. Yeah, I really want to get into diving into some Unreal. Lionel, I know you've messed with it a bit because based on you answering some of the questions.
Very recently, last week, for the first time. So yeah, it was funny.
Oh, cool. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. No, that sounds really great. Yeah, Brian's saying thanks for the great session, showing the opportunities. And yeah, Hannah was saying thanks so much for the overview. And everyone else in the background. Yeah, so thanks, Chad. It was really great. And thanks, Lionel, for answering all those questions in the background as well.
Yes.
Thank you, everyone who was here live with us with your great questions and great tips as well. So Jeff was dropping some tips in about some stuff as well for everyone, which is really great. I was sharing those with the group.
Sweet.
Cool.
Thanks for moderating, Elly. And thanks, Dr. Sassy, in the background for doing all the Dr. Sassy stuff, logging everything for the YouTube video.
Absolutely. Yeah. And so don't forget, everyone, Wednesday, 8 a.m. Pacific time, log in to the YouTube live, which is happening on the main Maxon YouTube channel. So that's Maxon VFX. And yeah, check out some of the great stuff that's coming. Cool. Well, yeah, thanks again, Chad. Great session. Thanks to Lionel. Thanks to everyone here with us. We hope you have a lovely rest of your Monday and a lovely rest of your week. And we will catch you on another session very soon.
Thank you all so much.
Bye-bye.
Take care, everybody.
Bye, everyone.